Hi everyone, I hope you are all well. It's been a couple of weeks since I last saw you because, quite frankly, I've been a bit of a reading rut. I had about a week where I just didn't feel like reading, and so I've been binge watching. And as you know, I've been watching American Horror Story. I've now finished series 6. I'm starting series 7 tomorrow. Roanoke was fabulous, as was Hotel. Freak Show is still my favourite, but I think Hotel and Roanoke are my drawn second favourite. They were absolutely brilliant, and it's a really dark, gloomy day here in England. Even though I've got the lights on, it's still appearing really quite dark on my screen. So it is what it is. I can't do anything else. I've got all my lights on, so there we go. But yeah, so I've had a couple of weeks to read this book, and I have got out of my reading rut, which is good. I just would finish day work and I just felt like, what, I really don't want to read. I want to do something else. And as I've said before on this channel, I'm not going to push myself to force myself to read something if I'm not in the right headspace. And if it takes me 2 weeks to read a book, it takes me 2 weeks. It is what it is, and that's what's happened here. So I'm here to review the book The Coffin Path by Katherine Clements. Now, I did a bit of research. This is Katherine's third book. It's the first of hers that I have read, but it's her third book. And she's on a lot of panels to do with horror writing and stuff like this. So she's got a wide knowledge, wide span of the genre and such. So I was like, okay, let's see how this goes. Now, I hadn't heard of Katherine at all before buying this book. It was that I saw this on Amazon when I was, going through putting books in my Amazon wish list through last year, and I just thought, it looks, it sounds quite intriguing, it looks intriguing. And Laura Purcell, one of my favorite authors that I've come across this year, has a short review of it on the front cover. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to check this out. So in case you don't know what this is about, The Coffin Path, it's set in 1674. Now I'm debating myself with that year. Let me just check. Oh, come on, pages, separate. No, 1674. I was right. So it starts in spring of 1674 and it takes the rest of that year. So say over about, I don't know, maybe about 9 months or so. The story covers, and yeah, so it follows a girl called Mercy who lives at Scarcross Hall with her father. They have various servants, and it's in Yorkshire, in the moors, moorlands and such, and it's her home. It's just, this is her life. She has no other siblings. Her mother died in childbirth when she was very young. Her father never remarried. So she is the heir to the hall. But the hall and the land that it sits on is very well known to her and the rest of the surrounding villages and such for being cursed, because previous owners of the hall have come to gruesome ends, and it's said to be the place where the devil wanders. And Mercy doesn't really believe that kind of stuff. She's just, she's like, more like, it's more of a story. This is, but it does kind of plague on the back of her mind. Like, she's saying one thing about it, but in the back of her mind, she's got it lingering there in her thoughts. And then arrival of a man looking for work triggers certain things to happen, and she starts hearing things are disappearing, there's lots of stuff going on, and it leads into quite a dramatic ending. So that's the overview of the story. Now, Katherine Clements, as I said, I hadn't come across her right before. I didn't know what to expect or anything. For the genre, I thought she was good, but she wasn't great. that's not criticism or you know, of her, of what she's produced, because what she's produced is a strong piece, but I wanted her to push it more throughout reading this book. And I don't know if it was partly because of my reading rut that I had, but throughout I kept on knowing in my mind that these are characters in a story. These whereas, as you know, if you've you know, watched any of my other videos, I very much like an emotional connection to characters and feel that they are real. And so when you have a ghost or horror, you know, horror genre story, you feel it even more by having that emotional connection. That's why I loved Laura Purcell's books. They were so creepy and quite terrifying at times, but because I got completely immersed in the character, I knew exactly what they were feeling and everything. I felt the threat and the creepiness more. But with Catherine's book, I didn't have that. So when something creepy happened, it was just a bit like, oh, okay, right, that happened. You know, sometimes like when you have when you're watching a horror or a spooky film, let's put it that way, and you're watching it and you're enjoying it, but you don't jump at the jump scares, you know, kind of. It's just like, it just not that thing of, oh, just generally scary things don't scare you, but it's just like your brain has just disconnected, like you're watching stuff happen but you're not taking it in. That kind of what it felt like for me reading this book. The characters were interesting. Mercy, who we follow throughout because it's written from her perspective, she was an interesting, very strong woman. She's a young woman, but she is very, very strong. She does farm work, she deals with servants and such. Her father is elderly, and so she needs to look after him as well. So it kind of feels like she's very much in charge, but she very much knows her position as a woman. She can't necessarily do the things that she needs to do, so therefore, you know, so like discussions that need to be had, buying food and such for the animals, something like that. Because she's a woman, she can't physically go to the person who's selling this stuff and say, right, how much do you want for it? Here's the money. A man has to do that, so she has to hand over stuff to her various workers in order to get done what she needs to get done. So in a way, she's kind of frustrated, but she very much has this iron kind of strong demeanor about her, which I liked, but I didn't emotionally connect with her. I didn't feel, I didn't feel anything from her, and I think it's because she has this iron guardedness about her. She never wants anyone to see her inner self. And for me, the audience didn't get to see her inner self, even though we hear and read, as they thoughts in her head. It just didn't make me want to like her, to get to know her. And I felt more connections with the servants than I did our main character. So that was a key issue for me. Now, Katherine is fabulous when it comes to atmosphere. She wrote the weather amazingly, and I've got family that live up north, and I know it's not quite the same as Yorkshire with the moors and everything and how windy it is, but I've experienced it. I know what it is, what it's like, and how cold it can be and such, and how harsh it can be. And because they're out in the fields and such, constantly dealing with, you know, sheep and all that lot, there's a lot of it that is said over and over and over again. And yeah, she can write the rain beautifully, the wind, the howling, all that lot. It very much made me think of Sourhall, the Audible original drama, which I'd spoken about listening to, I don't know, maybe a month ago, which I really enjoyed. And the way she was describing Yorkshire farm life and made me think of that. And she was very good at it. But what I also didn't like, or it kind of irked me, is that pretty much every chapter she explains, right, it's another day on the farm, we're doing this, okay, I'm having the routine, the sheep again, and going out, and the rain, okay, the day's over, right, we're going out with sheep again, it was just a bit repetitive in certain things. And I know that it's because it's telling daily life on a farm in the 1600s, but still, it was just a bit like, okay. But then as I was reading, I realized why she was doing that. It wasn't necessarily just because of the pacing issues, because she was spreading this over like 9-month period. But it kind of irked me a little, like at the end of the spring section, something happens. And I'm like, oh, okay, right. We're starting to get stuff building up, okay. And then you turn the page and it says summer. And, okay, so what's happened in the gap between where you were in the middle of spring and summer? And it's like, well, okay, nothing happened. Right, okay, so it was. I'm not saying that all this ghost story needs to be done over a span of a few days, because that's not realistic. Even though that is how like movies tend to do things, kind of. But it's just a bit like the fluidity of the actual scary stuff. It was sporadic. And then what that meant was that when you get to the winter section, right at the end of the book, it feels like suddenly you're going at 100 miles per hour. And then the ending, it's a very interesting ending, don't get me wrong, but it's quite abrupt. And then it was like, oh, and because you've had these chunks of stories where you have these jumps in the seasons, I was expecting to turn over the page and say spring, and then it was like, oh no, writer's acknowledgement. Okay, that's it, it's over. So even though it had strong elements to it, at the same time, it felt a little disconnected, and I felt disconnected from the characters, as I mentioned. So thus it kind of just felt like, right, well, that was an okay story, but I wanted more from it. I mean, clearly Katherine has been influenced by Wuthering Heights. You can't look, even the cover, you can't look at that and not think of Wuthering Heights. And what she's learned from that, as well as other books, which has influenced what she's written, she's learned from very well. I just wanted more. If that length of time where we're spending so much time talking about the mundanity of working on the farm, and each day we keep talking about sheep, I'm like, well, why don't you just take a chunk of that out and have us emotionally attach more to Mercy? Then that way it would have been so much stronger for me, I feel. But obviously each to their own. I'm sure there's lots of people who've read this and loved it, and there's lots of authors who have quoted, including Laura Purcell, who said full of creeping menace. It is full of creeping menace, but there was some things that I'm like, for this genre, I need this book to hit ABC, and it's going AD, so it didn't quite hit the mark for me, but it's still a strong book. So I'm going to do a quick reading of this. It's starting to rain, guys. Ugh. Perfect for this reading. So this is around the middle of the book. So I think this might be in the summer section. Oh no, autumn. This is the autumn section. So various things have happened, and Mercy is starting to notice more and more strange things, and things are disturbing her sleep and such. And this is her having some time in her bedroom at night, and something happens. This is more of the creepier side stuff. So, these days sleep takes me like death. I'm exhausted from working in the fields with Ambrose and Elias, and we try to bring in our small barley crop. My limbs are heavy and complaining, hands blistered and raw, and my head pounds so I cannot follow my thoughts. Each night I fall into darkness, only to wake time and again thinking that I've heard a shout, someone crying out in fear, or the chuckle and pop of burning wood. Even though I know the dangers, sometimes I fall asleep before snuffing out the candle, and when I wake I cannot distinguish shadows cast by the dancing flame from spirit form. I'm taunted by my imagination. Tonight I've woken by a whisper. I swear someone spoke my name. I lie still, listening, struggling to clear the fog of dreams. Did I conjure the sound in my sleep? Then I hear a step upon the floorboards. I strain to make out the hush of a soft-soled shoe above night sounds, the breath of the wind rising on the moor and the stir and rustle of the turning leaves. It comes again, one step, then two, then a flurry, a trip of a child moving from the casement to the foot of the bed. I hold my breath, close my eyes, and shrink beneath the coverlet as my blood runs chill. My skin shivers as if doused in icy water. I want to draw my knees up, away from the foot of the bed, curl into a ball and hide my face, but I dare not move. It cannot be Sam this time. Once more, quick, up and down at the foot of the bed. My lungs begin to ache and a breath shudders out of me. There's a sudden bluster at the window as the wind drives rain against the panes. In my fear, it seems again that someone whispers my name. The footsteps move closer along the side of the bed, so that the thing, whatever spirit this is, comes level with my face. It stops. I squeeze my eyes tight shut. I hear the rasp of ragged breath, perhaps my own, I cannot tell. I pray, simple words in earnest. Please God, save me, forgive me, have mercy. I feel sure that the thing is reaching out towards me. I sense a hand hovering, about to pull the coverlet from my face. A sudden, profound sadness swells in my chest, threatens to overwhelm me. Fear recedes as sorrow matches it. My heart aches. Gathering all my courage, I drew the coverlet down to see nothing, blinded by darkness. Then the footsteps patter away towards the door and are gone. I lie still for a few minutes, listening to the rain, waiting for my breath to slow and my heart to cease racing. I hear the branches of a tree scratch against the downstairs window, the gurgle as water runs from the eaves to pool in the yard, a creak of timbers as wind buffets the house. A tear leaks out the corner of my eye, trickles past my ear to my neck. I know I did not imagine it this time. I cannot deny it. Something is haunting this house, haunting me. Eventually I pull the coverlet down. The room is still as dark shadows pitched in corners. Trembling, I force myself to sit and strike the timber box to light the candle at my bedside. But as the light floods the room, I see, there at the foot of my bed, the old fire screen. I stare at the hideous thing in disbelief, flooded with fear. All my reason tells me that this cannot be. I must be dreaming, but it's as real as the key to the old bedchamber that still hangs about my neck. With my heartbeat deafening, I get out of bed and force myself towards it. The painted boy's eyes seem fixed upon me, his empty stare, his mirthless smile. I shove the thing with my foot, almost expecting to feel the soft, warm give of human flesh, but it's solid and cold. Desperately, I try to find an explanation. Could Agnes have brought it into my room? Does she have another key to the bedchamber? Or perhaps Sam? I found him playing make-believe with the thing before. Is it possible that I was so exhausted that I did not notice it when I retired? I know deep inside that those vain attempts sorry, I've got a phone call. Those vain attempts to comfort, I cannot be a coincidence. The footsteps, now this. I sink to my knees, staring at the boy's face. I see the needle prick in his cheek that I made myself, the paint cracked and falling away to his temple, the lifeless eyes that seem to stare back. Sorry, guys, I'm going to have to stop for a minute. Sorry about that, guys. Had a phone call I had to deal with, so I'm going to start the beginning of the paragraph that I was on when my phone went off. Right. With my heartbeat deafening, I get out of bed and force myself towards it. The painted boy's eyes seem fixed upon me, his empty stare, his mirthless smile. I shove the thing with my foot, almost expecting to feel the soft, warm give of human flesh, but it's solid and cold. Desperately, I try to find an explanation. Could Agnes have brought it into my room? Does she have another key to the bedchamber? Or perhaps Sam? I found him playing make-believe with the thing before. Is it possible I was so exhausted that I did not notice when I retired? I know deep inside that those are vain attempts at comfort. It cannot be a coincidence. The footsteps, now this. I sink to my knees, staring at the boy's face. I see the needle prick in his cheeks that I made myself, the paint cracked and falling away at his temple, the lifeless eyes that seem to stare back. For a brief second, I'm convinced that there is animation in them, a look of knowing accusation and blame. I take hold of the screen, my fingers curling around the boy's shoulders. It's madness, but I feel as if he might hold the answers I crave so. What do you want? What do you want from me? There's no reply, save the wind wailing from the moortop. So as you can see, it is very atmospheric, but because of the structuring and the lack of emotional connection to our main character, Mercy, I just couldn't really love it. So if I were to give it a 5-star rating, I think I'd give it a 3 out of 5. It's a strong book, but it's not the strongest book. And there could have been better uses of time with structuring for me personally. But as I said, there are other people who've probably read this book who absolutely love it. And I'm not saying you shouldn't read this book, because people should. You should read whatever you want to read, of course. But yeah, I would say give it a go. But just FYI, it didn't quite work for me. So there we are. So those are my thoughts on The Coffin Path by Katherine Clements. So it was an interesting book to read for sure. So key questions. Would I read this again? I'm not fussed about reading it again, but if it's a case of, like I have had with other books that I've read on this channel, if they were a case of that I was struggling to find something to read that I just like maybe take on holiday or whatever, I could take The Coffin Path and I'd be comfortable reading it for sure. So would I read any more of Katherine's books? I think I'd definitely give Katherine a go with any other books that she's read. I'm not against reading her other works at all. It was an interesting one. As I said, I know this is her 3rd book, but I don't know how many books that she has published. She could have 4, she could have 40 for all I know. But yeah, so it'd be interesting to read her other books and see if her style has changed at all throughout the time of her writing her books. Would I recommend this to anyone? I definitely say give it a go for anyone who wants to read it, because it's not too bad. There's some things that just didn't quite work for me. So those are my thoughts on The Coffin Path by Katherine Clements. Have you read this book? I'd love to know what you think. Leave a comment in the comments box below. Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Entirely up to you to decide. And I'll be back with my thoughts on the next book I'm reading, which is A Shadow on the Lens by Sam Hercombe. So this is the last book that I have announced, and I figured out that I have, out of the list that I had already announced at the beginning of the year, I have 15 books left. And if I read one of those books per week, going forward, I will have finished my books that I had, set myself the goal of reading by the middle to end of August. Crazy. Usually I like the longest amount of time I've had between the end of the year and finishing challenge has been like a week, not 4 months. So I will be buying other books to fill up that gap. And don't forget, I also have to read any books that are given to me. And I know my sister has given me 2 books for my birthday in like a month's time, just over a month's time. So there's another 2 books to add to that as well. And of course, I might get some other books for my birthday and such. So, we'll just have to see what happens. So there'll be even more. But I'm definitely going to be buying some more books, guys, so I can get this challenge, carry on with it up until the end of the year. But yeah, I'll be back with my thoughts on Shadow of the Lens as soon as I finish reading. All right, and guys, bye.